I
Oh,
allowed it. There you go. There you go.
all
It's
right.
just
Yeah.
started.
Sorry.
Right. All right. So welcome to part 3 of our speech and language webinar series. So far we have covered typical speech and language development and speech and language red flags. And tonight we are going to look at dummies and screen time, which are potentially 2 of the hottest topics in early years settings and beyond. There won't be much, I don't think, that shocks you. There won't be much that you're not already probably expecting to hear. And there's probably going to be nothing wildly different to practice that you are already employing in your settings. What there is, however, is a bank of evidence that hopefully will give you a little more confidence when you start to have potentially those difficult conversations with parents. I think when you have some evidence at your fingertips, it is very, very helpful. So hopefully that will give you that today. Okay, so firstly, the housekeeping rules for Zoom: cameras on or cameras off. I really don't mind. It's up to you. Please keep yourselves on mute at all times, just so that we're not party to any household conversation. So if you can all pop yourselves on mute now, that would be super. Okay. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. I may not see them now, but I will certainly come to them at the end. Come and go as you need. We all have, we're probably all at home. We have children, dogs, family, people at home, and we all need cups of tea or whatever on a Friday night. So please do that. Slides will be emailed to you at the end, so please don't be writing feverishly. It will all come to you electronically afterwards. So firstly, just a nod to the Reach Out team. We have Damon joining us tonight, but also on your travels as you work with the service, you may see Victoria, Jess, and Lisa. Just a quick note about what the Stronger Practice Hub is. So the Stronger Practice Hub, they support early years settings to improve outcomes in the local area across the early years foundation stage. And this is particularly focusing on the personal and social development side of things, communication, language, literacy, and maths. Across the UK, there are 18 Stronger Practice Hubs, and this hub to which we're affiliated, it's based at the Barn Nursery School in Greenster Green. And this is all funded by the Department for Education as part of the early years COVID-19 recovery education. Here is an overview of what the recovery plan can offer you. And it's a very, very good idea to go and check out the early years evidence store. There is absolute wealth of evidence on there, not just on communication, speech and language, but all sorts of aspects of early years development. And it is well worth a look if you've got a question that's niggling you and you want to see if there's any up-to-date evidence. Just a note as well that there are some fully funded programs available. Talking Time is currently recruiting as well, which is an intervention program supporting staff to make their settings, more language rich. And there's also bespoke support available too. So do use the hub because it is a very useful thing and it's all free to you guys. You can use the fancy codes to find out a little bit more information and follow on Instagram and Facebook as well. All right, so dummies and screen time. I'd be keen to know if you can type in the chat box at some point whether which one of these is your biggest issue in your setting and whether you find it hard to broach these subjects with parents. Do you broach these subjects with parents, or is it one of those things where you talk in your setting, go, gosh, that child's always on a screen, but you don't actually really do anything about it because you feel perhaps it's not your place, or you don't have enough evidence to hand, which gives you the confidence to have that conversation. So as I said at the start, I'm hoping that having some evidence to hand may help with the conversations. So the dummy debate, I'm going to flip-flop between talking as a mother and talking as a speech and language therapist here. This is my daughter, my youngest daughter, Connie, when she was little, absolutely loved her dummy, which had some sharp intakes of breath across speech and language colleagues at the time. But there are some pros of dummy use, and anecdotally, it was very helpful for me. So they're presumed to settle babies to sleep. However, there's very little empirical evidence to verify it, but lots of anecdotal evidence. Premature infants who don't have that suck-swallow reflex at birth are given a dummy straight away in the NICU or SCBU to facilitate that sucking. So yes, it does strengthen up the sucking muscles and get that mechanism working well. Dummies are presumed to help infants with reflux. Again, although we think it, there's little evidence to support it. Dummies and SIDS is another hot topic. So the nature between dummy use and SIDS isn't really understood. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more now because I had a little look at the research just to see, because it's so woolly, whether I could try and make a little more sense of it. It's a very wordy slide, but we'll go through it. And the basic crux of it is what's in red. If parents start using a dummy, they should always use it. So going back to the top of the slide, studies in the UK and elsewhere found that dummy use is associated with reduced SIDS risk. Some have suggested the protective effect is quite large, but the most recent UK SIDS study found no association, mainly because the dummy fell out of the infant's mouth. And again, we see this a lot when babies fall asleep with their dummy in their mouth, and soon when they're in a deep sleep, that dummy comes out. So actually, does it really afford any protection? Is it that sucking that affords the protection? That kind of makes us think that possibly it doesn't. But some studies have found that it's actually the regularity of dummy use that's the key factor, and whether it's used for that last sleep, that nighttime sleep. So one study found that a greater association with SIDS where a dummy is usually used, but not for the last sleep. That's the factor. So I think it's a case of if you use it, use it. If you don't, don't. But the other thing to mention here is that if you see the line, the most recent UK SIDS risk study, well, that was 2009. So that's a good sort of 15 years old now. So actually, we do really need some more recent research on this, or some more up-to-date research on this. So I think, you know, it's woolly. If you've got a regular dummy user, yes, it's probably, you know, there is a relationship between that and SIDS prevention. Otherwise, not so strong. Bit woolly, unfortunately. The cons of using a dummy. So this is my eldest daughter, who was a very refluxy baby and also enjoyed a dummy. So dummies, the cons of a dummy, aside from the ones that we really know about, dummies have been associated with the increased risk of tummy bugs and thrush, oral thrush. They've also been associated with an increased risk of glue ear, so otitis media, glue ear. And we talked in one of my previous webinars about the effects of glue ear on speech and language. Dummy use has been associated with dental caries and malocclusion, and we'll look at some pictures of that in one of the next slides. It's also been associated with nipple confusion and decreased breastfeeding. Some unusual problems such as latex allergies also crop up as well, but they are the more unusual side of things. So dummies and speech. So this is the one that obviously resonates most with me. So we can see here the dental malocclusion, where you get that kind of bridge across the top teeth particularly. So there's a lot of jargon in this slide. Don't worry, you're not going to get tested at the end. So articulation of your bilabial sounds. Bilabial means the ones where we use both lips. Bi for both, labial for lips, bilabial. So your b, m, and p. If you put your thumb in your mouth to mimic a dummy, you cannot say a b, a m, or a p, because you can't close your lips properly. Alveolar sounds, they're the ones where we put our tongue just up behind our top teeth. So t, d, n, s. Can't say those with a dummy in our mouth either. Palatal and velar sounds like y, we can't say either. And what you end up with is a phonological, so a speech sound process or a speech sound issue called backing, which is where sounds that should be made at the front, such as our t and d, are all said with a back sound like k and g, because they're the only ones that you can really say well when you have a dummy in your mouth. So you have a child who may say, can we go today? Can we go to the park today? Because they can't say that p, t, or d. It comes out today. And speech and language therapists can usually notice a really chronic dummy user quite quickly just by the features of their speech. They're not engaging in vocal play. They're not producing raspberries or consonant and vowel-like cooing and babbling. We can't get ba 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 or ma 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 or da 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 while we have a dummy in our mouth. They're not going to be imitating facial expression and mouth movements as much. They can't, because obviously sucking on the dummy restricts that. There's been little research into the direct relationship between dummies and dental malocclusions and speech problems, but you know, we see it, and we know that there's recurrent glue ear, and we know that there are speech problems when there's a dummy use. Okay, so what to do if your child has a dummy. Now this is Darcy, again, my eldest, the night after the dummy fairy had been. And the dummy fairy, we put all of her dummies in a gift bag and put the gift bag on the windowsill. And the dummy fairy came and left her this beautiful Anna costume. I think she was 3 and a little bit when we did that. So in my opinion, you aim to get rid of the dummy or the bottle around 12 months or sooner. After that point, I think personally, and this is anecdotally, but personally, I think you have to wait until they're old enough for you to talk them through the process and they understand what's going to happen. I think if you take it away in that no man's land where they're attached to their dummy, but they don't know why it's gone, that can make it very, very difficult. Advice is to use a flat teat, one of the orthodontic teats, rather than a cherry teat, the big round old style teats, as it has less effect on teeth. Again, hands up, my two both really didn't like the orthodontic teats and had a cherry teat, so it's not the end of the world if you do use them. Again, this is the advice that you're probably all well familiar with. Try cuddling or reading to your child before bedtime instead of giving the dummy in the bottle. Remove the dummy or the bottle when your child is trying to talk. It's absolutely fine for them to have it at sleep time, but not when they're trying to have a conversation. Praise your child if they give up the dummy or the bottle. Choose the right time to give up, not when you're under pressure. We know it won't work. And once you've decided to give it up, do not be tempted to give it back. Make sure you've got rid of them all as well, and there's none left stuck behind the sofa. They will find them. Okay, here are lots of references if you want to look at any of these more. So these are lifted from Speech and Language UK's website, who used to be ICANN, but actually all of these marry in very nicely with what I've just talked about. So if there's anything there that you want to particularly dive into, like dummies and breastfeeding, dummies in early oral development, please do have a little look and find these articles online. Okay, so that's dummies. Now we're going to look at screen time and speech and language development. And I think this really is probably the hot topic, not just in early years, but primary, secondary, even adulthood at the moment. It really is something that is obviously something very new in our lifetime. So since the COVID-19 pandemic, children's screen time has risen by 52%. And that comes from a study in 2022, which was published in the Journal of American Pediatrics. And that's a huge statistic there, isn't it? Really big statistic. So we're going to have a little look at some more research. So thinking about our early years kiddos. So research is showing that, and this is all from Hannon, and you may well have heard of Hannon. They are big in speech and language world for looking at parent and child interaction. So their intervention is very much looking at how parents interact with their children. So obviously for them, screen time was a very hot topic, very, very well trusted source. So children over the age of 2, they may benefit from watching educational content online, something like Dora the Explorer, Sesame Street, and Blaze and the Monster Machine, something like that. Children under the age of 2 don't benefit from this type of content at all. So when you've got littlies under 2 and the parents going, oh yeah, but they're watching Sesame Street, or oh yeah, but they're watching Dora the Explorer, it's not going to be making any difference to them whatsoever. Increased screen time does not help language development and likely hinders it. Most research demonstrates a negative effect on language development. Some studies demonstrate a null effect, but there aren't any that demonstrate a positive effect, unless children are talking to their parents or caregivers while watching the screen. That's the only time that screen time can be beneficial is if you're using it as a catalyst for conversation. So if you're using it to discuss what's going on, talking about what the people are doing, how they might be feeling, what might be happening next, that has a positive impact on language development, but not just the watching on its own. It's only contingent on an adult interacting at the same time. So what can we recommend then? This is a useful slide perhaps to share with your parents if you have concerns, or even as just maybe just part of a newsletter perhaps that goes out in your setting. So pay attention to what your child is watching. So for children over the age of 2, choosing educational programming does tend to be better for their language development. Interact with your child during screen time. So watching shows with your child and talking about what they can see can help learn new things. Try and follow the recommended guidelines about screen time limits. Couldn't find anything for the UK, but America and Canada suggest no screen time for children under the age of 2, and kids 2 to 5, 1 hour a day. So have a little think about the littlies in your setting and think how much screen time you potentially think they might be having. And don't forget about books and playtime. But I think if we're sitting here on this webinar, we're all probably singing from the same songbook for that one. So yeah, researchers are concerned that screen time might be replacing playtime. Okay. And it's an easy trap to fall into. You know, I've got, as you've seen, I've got 2 children, and actually popping them on a screen sometimes does feel like the easiest thing to do. And in some circumstances, perhaps that is the right thing to do if you have something pressing, but not all the time. Here are some study links that you may wish to go and have a look at. So one study demonstrates that children under 3 are unable to relate what they see on a screen to real life. So again, it kind of blows that theory out of the water when parents go, oh, you know, it's okay, they're watching this and they're learning something from it. If they're under 3, very unlikely. Second study here shows that older children between 2 and 6, so, you know, perhaps maybe 3 to 6 might be a better estimate here, but they can learn a little from screen time. So in this study, children who watched Daniel Tiger did have increased social skills. But again, you notice this caveat, especially when their parents spoke to them as they watched. That is a real driver for progress for children. And the final one shows that infants who watch TV before 12 months and have 2 hours or more of TV a day are 6 times more likely to have a language delay. And that's huge, particularly when we think that screens have largely sort of, I think, replaced the sitting in front of the TV that we perhaps all used to do. Now, before questions, what I thought I would do as a slight addition was just show you some iPad apps that I do think are very useful for speech and language, because actually, if we know that children are going to be on screens, and let's be honest, most of the parents in settings do give their children some screen time, we may as well be recommending useful apps for them. So I just thought I'd get my iPad out and show you a couple that I do recommend. So the first one that I've got here, it's by Night and Day Studios. It's really, really lovely. It's called Peekaboo Barn. And bear with me. So you have your barn, you've got to try and guess who's inside. You can do a little bit of listening to what sound the animal is making. Open the doors. You see, it's an American farm, so there's a llama on it. But I am assured by one of my American parents that yes, mum, we have llamas on our farms. But I like to say hello llama, goodbye llama. The llama is standing. You can talk about what they're doing. The owl. So this owl is at the top of the barn. Are they going to be in the bottom of the barn? You can talk about the positions. It's really lovely. And if you can get your hands on it, there's a really nice physical game that goes with it, where you have the barn and you can push this down and spin it and find your cat. On the other side, the cat is sleeping, and then you can put them to bed in real life. So that's a really nice combo that perhaps you can suggest that your parents have the iPad app at home. And if you can get hold of the game online, it's a nice one to have in setting to kind of consolidate it in a real life way. They also do a suite of peekaboos. Some are more topical. So there is Peekaboo Fridge, which is obviously good for food vocabulary. And they also have Peekaboo Presents, which is good at Christmas. and Peekaboo Halloween as well. So that's a really nice little suite. So if you just search on the App Store for Peekaboo, then you will find some of those there. The other ones that I want to show you are this one. It's called, sorry, it's very loud. Hang on a minute. I wasn't the last one to use this iPad, I think. So it's called My Playhome. And if you go in, you have all the different rooms of the house, and the child can actually manipulate it, so they can stop the washing machine, they can move things around, they can bring characters into play. You can shut the fridge, get things out of the fridge. You can turn it from daytime to nighttime, or you can change the weather. It's really lovely. You've got lots and lots of different rooms within the house. You can take it up into the bathroom, pull the shower curtain, shut the doors. Lots and lots of different things. Leave your towel on the floor like a real child does. Lots and lots of different things you can do with this. It's basically like having a kind of virtual doll's house, I think. And I really like that. I think if a child's going to be doing something on the iPad, sort of manipulating characters and thinking about what they're doing and acting out the things that they might be doing in real life on the iPad, it's probably slightly more value than just watching YouTube potentially. And the other suite of things that's really good, if I can just find it, is there's an app by that's called Splingo. And that is made by speech and language therapists. So actually, you kind of know where you are with that. So here we go. So the Splingo apps cover lots of different things. They can cover, there's a really good verbs one. You've got pronouns, categories, actions. This is an excellent one. It covers lots of different verbs. Early words, past tense, describing words, and there's a little assessment as well. So each element is kind of maybe just like 99p, so you can choose which thing you really, really want. And I think that's another really good one. You've got a trusted source that it's come from with speech and language therapists, and you can use them in your setting, perhaps as part of groups. So I do tend to use the iPad in speech and language therapy sometimes, perhaps as a reward at the end. So I might do 5 or 10 minutes at the end of a session on here. So the child thinks they're getting some really good fun, screen time. And I know that actually I've targeted that screen time for something that's actually pretty useful. So I think that's probably the best way to maximize the potential that a screen does have. So we're just about there in terms of the training portion of the webinar. So I hope you found that useful, and it will give you a bit more evidence and a bit more confidence to address parents or other professionals if you think there is something that needs to be brought to someone's attention. So if there's any questions,